I stared at the cup of coffee in front of me, steam rising with a strange aroma. Something was off. The scent wasn't like the familiar coffee I drank every morning. It had a slight sourness, a musty undertone, and even a faint metallic hint that immediately made me feel uneasy. "Are you going to try it, James?" My husband tilted his head, a strange smile playing on his lips, but his eyes remained as cold as ever. I glanced at Lauren, James' sister-in-law, who sat across from me at the dining table in her luxurious Austin home. She was stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, but I noticed she hadn't taken a single sip. I forced a small smile, hiding the growing unease in my chest. "Of course," I replied, picking up the cup but not bringing it to my lips right away. I watched the dark liquid ripple inside, a chill running down my spine. I wasn't someone who doubted things without reason, but after 3 years of marriage to James and a series of strange incidents happening whenever he and Lauren were around, I had learned to be cautious. Just last month, I ended up in the hospital with a mysterious case of food poisoning after having dinner at Lauren's house. The doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause, but I remembered the nausea, dizziness, and sharp stomach cramps that hit me just minutes after drinking a cup of tea Lauren had made for me. I also recalled last year's Christmas party, when Lauren had accidentally spilled a cocktail on my dress in front of everyone, forcing me to leave early. And what about the times my food tasted slightly off during family meals? The unexplained headaches, the lingering fatigue. At first, I thought it was all coincidence, but over time, a clear pattern emerged. Every time Lauren had something to do with my food or drink, I ended up feeling sick in some way. And now, this cup of coffee. Lauren took a sip from her cup, but something seemed off. She didn't actually drink it, just mimicked the motion as if trying to reassure me. James, however, was still watching me intently, waiting for me to drink. My heart pounded in my chest, but I maintained my composure. I lifted the coffee cup, bringing it close to my lips, inhaling lightly before pretending to take a sip. In that split second, I stole a quick glance at James and Lauren. They exchanged a look. Nothing obvious, but something in their silent communication sent a shiver down my spine. A thought flashed through my mind. If I drank this coffee, I might end up spending another afternoon in the emergency room, just like last time. But if I didn't, they would suspect something. I needed to know the truth. As I set the cup down, I deliberately flicked my wrist, making it seem like an accident as the coffee spilled onto the tablecloth. "Oh no," I gasped, quickly standing up, feigning clumsiness. In the chaos of steadying myself, my hand swiftly nudged my cup toward Lauren and switched it with hers without anyone noticing. "I'm so clumsy," I laughed awkwardly, grabbing a napkin to wipe the table. Lauren narrowed her eyes at me but quickly masked her suspicion with a faint smile. "It's fine, I'll grab another napkin," she said, standing up. James smirked slightly. "You still haven't had your coffee, Elise," he said, calling me by the affectionate name he always used when trying to persuade me to do something. I smiled, picked up the new cup of coffee, actually Lauren's cup, and pretended to take a sip. "Delicious," I said, looking straight into his eyes. Lauren returned to the table, unaware of the swap that had just occurred. She picked up my cup, the one they had originally given me, and brought it to her lips. I held my breath. Outside the window, the afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the polished dining table. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but I knew that if there was something in that coffee, I would soon have my answer. And perhaps it would be the only proof I needed to expose them. Lauren took a sip of coffee and I held my breath. She didn't react immediately, but within seconds, I noticed a drastic change in her expression. Her face paled, her lips pressing together as if trying to suppress an unexpected wave of nausea. I set my cup down, my eyes locked on her. James noticed the change too. He leaned toward Lauren, his voice low. "Are you okay?" Lauren opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment her hands began to tremble violently, so much that she dropped the spoon onto the plate. The sharp clinking sound echoed through the quiet dining room. She gripped the edge of the table, inhaling deeply, but the panic in her eyes was undeniable. "James." Her voice was hoarse and shaky. "Something's wrong." James shot up from his chair, knocking it over with a loud thud. "Lauren, what the hell is happening?" I slowly stood up, placing my phone on the table, its screen discreetly recording the entire scene. Lauren was gasping for breath now, sweat forming on her forehead, and then she clutched her throat as if trying to stop a growing tightness. James whipped around to face me, his blue eyes flashing with both fear and anger. "Elise, what did you do?" I tilted my head slightly, keeping my voice dangerously calm. Me? I didn't do anything, James. I just drank Lauren's coffee. A moment of deadly silence filled the room. James froze in place. I could see the thoughts racing wildly through his mind. If I was fine but Lauren was reacting this way, then that meant... Suddenly Lauren convulsed violently, her hands grasping for something to steady herself but failing. She staggered to her feet but her knees buckled. James lunged forward trying to catch her, but Lauren slipped from his grasp, collapsing onto the floor, gasping for breath. "Lauren!" James shouted. She looked up at him, eyes wide with terror, and then she uttered a sentence that sent a chilling stillness through the entire room. "James, that's not my cup." The panic in her voice said it all. James went rigid, his face draining of color. He stammered, "What?" I crossed my arms over my chest, watching them silently. "Who were you trying to poison, James?" James didn't answer immediately. He looked at Lauren writhing on the floor, then back at me, his face ashen. I could see the battle in his mind. Deny everything? Or try to save Lauren? I didn't give him time to decide. I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services. "We need an ambulance immediately at 1408 Brookside Drive. Someone is showing signs of poisoning." James lunged for my phone, but I had already hit send before he could do anything. I locked eyes with him, my voice steady. "You'd better not try anything, James. Everything has already been recorded." Even through her pain, Lauren desperately clutched James's sleeve. Her voice was strangled from the violent spasms in her stomach, but I could still hear every word. "You said, just enough to make her sick, so she'd miss the board meeting." James glared at Lauren, as if willing her to be quiet, but it was too late. I crouched down, my voice slow and deliberate. "Do you want to explain, James? Or should Lauren finish the story?" James took one step back, then another, as if trying to escape this nightmare. But there was nowhere left to run. Lauren writhed on the floor, her body seizing from the toxins, but her eyes remained locked onto James with pure hatred. "You promised you wouldn't kill her?" Those words echoed in the room, and I saw James completely lose control. He clenched his fists, shaking his head repeatedly. We were just— "Lauren, you need to shut up," he shouted, but his voice was frantic, desperate. "No, James," I cut him off. "You planned this for a long time, didn't you? Not just this time, but all the times before. The tea last month, the breakfast 2 months ago. Every time I got sick without an explanation. The only difference now is that Lauren was the one who drank it." Lauren looked at me, her face contorted in pain, but her eyes filled with desperation. She didn't want to die. She had never thought James would do this to her. Outside, I heard the wailing sound of an approaching ambulance. James shook his head, muttering, "No, no, this isn't right." I locked eyes with him, my gaze unwavering. "No, James, this is exactly the ending you and Lauren planned for me. The only difference is, this time, the ones facing the consequences are you two." The door burst open and paramedics rushed into the room. I stood tall, stepping back to let them work. As they lifted Lauren onto the stretcher, I pulled out my phone, opened the recording from start to finish, and immediately sent it to the email of the lawyer I had prepared for this moment long ago. James stood frozen in place, his expression darkening as the reality of his downfall settled in. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life. Austin General Hospital glowed under the bright lights as I walked into the emergency hall, my phone gripped tightly in my hand. Lauren had been rushed into critical care, while James sat hunched over in a waiting room chair, his face pale as a ghost. I wasn't here out of concern for them. I was here to make sure justice was served. I walked straight to the reception desk and requested to speak with the doctor in charge of Lauren's treatment. A nurse led me to the office of Dr. Walters, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor. As I entered, she was reviewing Lauren's test results, her brow furrowed in concern. "Elise Bennett?" Dr. Walters looked up at me. "Yes, I'm the patient's sister-in-law." I pulled out a chair, taking a deep breath. "I have information you need to hear." I unlocked my phone, pulled up the audio recording from breakfast, and placed it on the desk. James and Lauren's voices played clearly in the silent room. "You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the board meeting. You promised you wouldn't kill her." Dr. Walters paused, looking up at me with a skeptical expression. Are you saying they deliberately poisoned you? Not just today, I leaned forward. Multiple times. I've been hospitalized 3 times in the past 6 months with similar symptoms. I believe none of those were accidents. Dr. Walters remained silent for a moment before nodding. I'll request a more thorough analysis of Lauren's blood sample. If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with an intentional poisoning case. I nodded, saying nothing more because I knew that all I had to do now was wait for the truth to come to light. 3 hours later, as I sat in the waiting area, a police officer approached me. Elise Bennett? I stood up. Yes? I'm Lieutenant Carter with the Austin Police Department. We received a call from the hospital regarding a suspicious poisoning case. He pulled out a notepad. Can you tell us what happened? I recounted everything, from the coffee switch to the audio recording I had captured. When I finished, Lieutenant Carter stared at me for a moment. So you believe your husband and sister-in-law intentionally poisoned you to prevent you from attending an important business meeting? I don't believe it anymore. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I had taken from James's phone earlier. I know it. He examined the messages, reading the incriminating lines. Just make sure she's too sick to leave bed that day. Last time wasn't strong enough. Increase the dose a little. Lieutenant Carter's expression grew more serious. Are you ready to file a formal complaint, Ms. Bennett? I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. I nodded firmly. The next morning, police executed a search warrant at James's office. I wasn't at the scene, but one of my colleagues called me as soon as they discovered the chemical vials hidden in James's desk drawer. Elise, you won't believe this, Rachel, my closest colleague said over the phone. The police just found a stack of documents with detailed notes on every time you got sick. Dosages, symptoms, onset times. It looks like an experiment. A chill ran down my spine. What else? They also found emails between James and Lauren. Rachel lowered her voice. He talked about handling a problem before the upcoming meeting with the new clients. Elise, they've been planning this for a long time. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Finally, the truth was out. 1 month later, James and Lauren's trial officially began. I sat in the witness stand, listening as the prosecutor laid out each piece of evidence. The recording I had captured played in the silent courtroom, their voices undeniable. Medical experts were called in to analyze my test results along with Lauren's. Dr. Walters stood before the jury, explaining that Lauren's blood contained a toxic compound not commonly found in everyday food. At higher doses, she said, her gaze sweeping over James and Lauren, it could cause heart failure or permanent neurological damage. I glanced at James. He was no longer the man I once loved. He was just a liar, fully exposed. When the jury declared James and Lauren guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, I didn't feel satisfaction. I only felt relief. The judge handed down the harshest sentence possible. 2 people who had once been part of my life would now have to pay for what they had done. As I stepped out of the courthouse, I paused for a moment, looking up at the clear blue Austin sky. My life had nearly been destroyed by those I trusted most, but now I had reclaimed it. And I vowed I would never let anyone manipulate or destroy me again. A year later, I stood on stage at the Austin Business Conference, the bright light shining down as I looked out at the hundreds of faces watching me. The applause still echoed through the hall. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be standing here, I wouldn't have believed them. But now, I knew I deserved this. I adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began my speech. Success doesn't come from talent or opportunity alone, but from perseverance and integrity, I said, my voice steady and strong. Sometimes, the biggest obstacles in our lives come from those closest to us. But when we overcome them, we become stronger. I saw several people in the audience nodding in agreement. Perhaps they too had experienced something similar. Betrayed, undermined by those they once trusted. I didn't mention James or Lauren by name. I didn't need to. This speech wasn't about them. It was about me. About how I had risen above it all, about how I had turned tragedy into the driving force to become better. After last year's trial, my life didn't change overnight. I still faced curious stares, hushed whispers whenever I walked into the office. But instead of letting it break me, I focused on my work. I worked harder than ever. Not just to prove that I deserved my position, but to prove that they couldn't destroy me. The contract with Greenway, the major client Lauren had once tried to steal from me, was finally mine. Not only that, but after the scandal with James and Lauren, more clients sought me out because they recognized my integrity. I built a strong team, people who believed in me not because of my reputation, not because of empty promises, but because I had proven my worth. And today I stood here, not just as a successful executive, but as someone who had overcome those who tried to drag me down. I ended my speech with a lesson I had learned firsthand. When someone deliberately tries to destroy you, don't waste time on revenge. The best revenge is success and living a happier life than they ever could. The room erupted into applause. As I stepped off the stage, a young woman approached me. She looked to be in her mid-20s, her eyes shining with admiration. "Elise, I just wanted to say your speech was incredible," she said. "I went through something similar, not as extreme as you, but a colleague tried to sabotage me to steal a contract. I wanted to give up, but hearing your story gave me the motivation to keep going." I smiled. Never let anyone else determine your worth. Work hard, stay honest, and success will come to you. She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. I left the hall, stepping outside into the cool Austin air, taking a deep breath. A sense of freedom washed over me. No more ghosts of the past, no more fear of being torn down. I knew James and Lauren had begun serving their prison sentences. I had never read a single article about them, never cared to know what they were going through after their conviction. They were no longer relevant to me. My phone buzzed with an email from Greenway confirming a new 3-year contract with my company. I smiled. This success wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that I had never needed them to succeed in the first place. Elise's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest obstacles in our lives come from those closest to us. Betrayal, as painful as it is, does not define us. How we rise after it does. Elise didn't choose revenge in the traditional sense, she chose success. And that is the greatest lesson of all. Instead of drowning in resentment, focus on yourself, your career, and what truly matters. Because in the end, the best victory isn't taking someone down, it's living a better life than they ever could,